This broadcast of In Focus is being made possible through the support of Reed Health. Reed Health, right beside you. And by First Bank Richmond, with 8 locations serving Wayne County. First Bank Richmond and you, doing great things together. Good evening and welcome to In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WCTV Channel 11. I'm Eric Marsh, Executive Director of Whitewater Community Television. Glad you're able to join us for this live special, yes Ryan, 90-minute edition of In Focus as we have a conversation with Richmond Mayor Dave Snow. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Some things I need to clean up before we start. Over the last few weeks, we have been doing maintenance on our various video servers. We started with Channel 11. Went to Channel 21. This week it's Channel 20, which is down. If you have tuned into that channel looking for iHeart Cooking or Proudly We Served or Chamber Chat or any of the other programs that you would normally find there, all you've been seeing is the Educational Bulletin Board, and that's because we are in a maintenance cycle, something we haven't done a lot of and found we really needed to. So it is taking a while. We went down last Friday. We are hoping to be back up during this weekend and back to regular programming on Channel 20 by the first of the week. Thanks to our underwriters for this program, Reed Health and First Bank Richmond. They are also sponsors of our 21 for Fun event, which is coming up on Saturday, June 17th. It'll be from 7 to 11 p.m. in the Student Events and Activities Center on the IU East campus. So if you get a chance, mark your calendar for that event. It is our 4th annual, always a lot of fun. Everybody who comes really seems to enjoy it, and it's happening on Father's Day weekend. So what a great way to kind of treat Dad out to a night of craps, blackjack, roulette, some poker, really a good time. We will be having information about tickets coming up by the end of the month. On the weather front, a number of counties in our area, including Wayne County, Fayette County, Union County, are under a tornado watch this evening until 10 p.m. WCTV will update that information as needed, both on the air and on social media. We were watching before we went on the air. There were some strong storms going through Delaware and Blackford. Those have become tornado warnings. So we are keeping an eye on the weather this evening during the show. Tonight's program is spotlighting the city of Richmond, but next week we'll be talking about the county as a whole, as Wayne County Commissioners President Ken Poust will be our guest on In Focus. He'll be joining us Thursday evening beginning at 6 o'clock in this spot, talking about some of the things going on in Wayne County. Obviously, they've been doing a lot of upgrading. If you've tried to walk around the sidewalk around the courthouse or the annex building, it's a difficult thing. That's just some of the work that's being done, so we'll talk to Commissioner Poust about that next week. On a different note, we'd like to pass along our condolences to the family of Arthur Van Vleet, who passed away on Sunday. Eric Van Vleet has been and will continue to be a guest host here on In Focus. I've known that he's been worried about his father for a while, and they've been dealing with that. So to Eric, Brad, and the rest of the Van Vleet family, our condolences, and you are in our prayers. A few weeks ago, we had a special In Focus where we really didn't do kind of this discussion. We just turned it over to the mayor and let him do the State of the City address, something that hadn't been done for a number of years. He was kind enough to come back, sit in with us this evening on our regular In Focus kind of format where it's question, answer, conversation. So we'll be talking for the next little bit about that speech and some other things. So Mayor, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks again for having me. It's always great to be here.
Your questions are being accepted. It's not just what comes to my mind, which is scaring some people to death. What's he going to ask? But if you have a question for the mayor, you can send us that question via Facebook Live, which we're broadcasting from this evening. Also on our Twitter feed at WCTV Info, or you can send us an email to wctv@iue.edu. The phone lines are also open, 973-8587. The speech that you gave was designed, I think, really to create some conversation in the community around some topics. Have you, from what you've seen, been getting some conversation around some of the issues that you brought up?
Yeah, I really have. I've had a lot of people email me or just come talk to me out in the city and say, you know, I heard what you were talking about, and I want to play a role in that. And that's, you were right, that's exactly, when I wrote that speech, that's what I wanted. I didn't want to get up and just state a bunch of facts that people could just hear or sort of blindly nod along with. I wanted them to hear the true state of the city, the good and the bad. And even if what I was saying somebody was going to disagree with, I thought that's still going to incite a discussion.
Sure.
And somebody might stand up and say, well, I'm going to be that vehicle of change. And that's what I really want, is to empower and encourage people to take an active role.
And you did that. You asked people to take an active role in a few different ways. I want to go through a couple of the points that you laid out and see where you want to go with those conversations. First of all, you have been, since you were a candidate, and probably even before that, just because you care about the city, involved in Heroin is Here and some of the other things dealing with the addiction problem that's not just here in Wayne County or Indiana, but across the United States. One of the things you laid out during your State of the City address was kind of that realization point that you, Dave Snow, could be involved in certain things. The city of Richmond really isn't designed to do some of what you've been involved in. The city of Richmond is really interested in the enforcement end, telling the drug dealers you're not welcome here and finding ways to move them on. Has that always been a realization point for you, that at some point you'd kind of have to make that split between who you are and what you personally care about and what the city cares about and has to deal with and what you have to speak about as mayor?
Sure. That's been tough for me. I mean, it really has been. I really care a lot about the people of this city, and so, you know, as soon as I take the office, people start coming to me and saying, you got to help with this. And I was really wanting to help in ways that I just didn't have the toolbox. I wish that as a city government, we had the toolkit to help with addict recovery and support, and we just don't have it. But we can attack it from that law enforcement side, and that's why I said, you know, that's great, and we can hit that front. But there's got to be something else I can do, and that's where I came up with the idea to empower the neighborhoods. You know, if we can really empower these neighborhoods and really get people coming back together and being vigilant and being a real network within their own neighborhood, it'll go a long way in stopping these things from growing. The seeds of the drug house are harder to plant when the neighborhood really comes together.
That was a focus a number of years ago, and it kind of waned a little bit. Can you bring it back, or are you hearing that people want to bring it back?
Absolutely, yeah. There was just a big gathering in council chambers last week, if you saw that on paladam.com, where the neighborhood services group got together, and their numbers are growing and growing, and people are already calling and saying, when did the mayor say we can turn in this application for this mini grant for our neighborhood? So the need is there, the want is there, and I really want to see people grab onto this and utilize it. And I'm going to keep pushing for it. I'm not going to use the speech as the only time that I bring it up and really challenge people, because it's a challenge. It's a real challenge for our culture today. And I talked about that in the speech. I said we come home and we kind of shut people out. We're all guilty of it. You pull in the garage, you close the garage door, you go through the garage door that goes into the kitchen, and that's it. Now you're home for the night. That's it. There's no going out and seeing if your neighbor's okay. We don't do those kind of things anymore. And so I'm really challenging people to step outside that box. And I'm stepping up. I'm holding my own block event with my neighborhood this summer. So I've already started the wheels moving on that. I'm not going to just challenge everyone else to do it and then I don't do it. So I've already started looking at how I send out invitations and how I bring my neighborhood together and get to know even more of my neighbors. It plays a huge role.
Is there a finite amount of money that can be used for these mini grants, and how did that decision to do it that way come about?
Well, in government, there's always a finite amount of money, an extremely finite amount of money. That actually, when you're talking about my challenges, I spent so many years as, just a working citizen that cared a lot about this city and followed government. And of course, I was one of those people that said, smaller government, take less away from me, do more with less government. Now I'm on this side of it, and I'm trying to find the resources to get things done. And I say, I'm one of the people that made it this way. This is hard. So of course, there's a finite amount of money, but I didn't want to just put the challenge out there for the neighborhoods to come together. I said, I don't want to just challenge you to do this. I want to empower you to succeed in this challenge. And so it's just that old saying, put your money where your mouth is. And so I said, let's set aside some money. And since then, I've even had at least one private donor step up and say, I'll donate to that. I'll give money to that so it can be an even bigger pot of money. So we're going to make it work, and I'm really excited about it. And like I said in the speech, I'm encouraging our police officers to attend these. I realize that not every neighborhood is suited to gathering for a cookout and to have a bounce house and to have cupcakes. Sure. That's not going to work in every neighborhood. But maybe it's literally just a training session where you can put a flyer out that says, the police will be here at 7:30 on this day. Let's gather and let's learn about how we witness and report crime and how we report activity so that we can see these things and catch them before they take off. And you can find that drug house before it gets started that way, by knowing your neighbors and knowing who's moving in and knowing what's going on. So
is that nosy neighbor syndrome?
Well, yeah, and that culture has really caught on in America. Like, don't be that nosy neighbor.
Yes.
Stay out of people's business. But then what ends up happening is this stuff gets away from us in our own neighborhoods.
People have moved around a lot more than they used to. People used to go, stay, roost for a long period of time. And I've heard people say, the people here in Richmond, Wayne County, they're the same people as been here. It's just that the numbers have dwindled. And what I've said to people is, no, there's a lot of people moving in and out that you may not have met. Right. So while the numbers have gone down, it's not necessarily the same people. So there are a lot of new people to get to know.
And what's amazing is the number of people that visit our city on the weekends. That come here seeking shopping and the food that we have. When you're a Richmond native and you live here your whole life, you become blind to some of the things that you're around all the time. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. I really rely on fresh eyes to show me the things that I miss because I've been here my whole life. But our tourism bureau does a fantastic job with like the chocolate trail that goes through the city and things like that. And I highly encourage everyone at some point, go to one of those stops just to be an ambassador of that. And meet the people that are coming in from out of town to shop and experience those things, and just talk to them, because I've done that, and it's amazing. So when they come in and they say, "Hey, we're here to get our free chocolate sample," and you say, "Where are you from?" and they'll tell you, "Oh, we drove here from South Bend. We were just looking for a quick weekend getaway, and this was a short enough drive, and some really cool stuff here. We saw the antique shopping in the Depot District, and we saw this and had to come check it out." And you start learning about what it is about Richmond that people see from a distance that pulls them in. It's really exciting. It kind of gives you that fresh set of eyes.
One of the things that, as you talk about the drug problem, enforcement is one of those things that came up, and public safety obviously is a huge piece of what the city administration is supposed to do. Last year, in the budget session, the police department was able to get money for a couple of additional police officers. Have not been able to hit that number yet as people continue to retire. Right. But how do you, as you look around for money, try to find it for additional police officers? Because it sounded like you wanted to beef up the police department even beyond what those last numbers were, and for the fire department, because one of the reasons they're at their numbers is because everybody at some point was asked to take a cut. And while things have gotten better, they're still not great.
We still have work to do. That's a definite issue. And when it comes to hiring the new police officers, one of the things I talked about in the State of the City is I've tasked the RPD administration with bringing back to me that optimal number. And one of the challenges in the State of the City was to condense it. So you have a lot of thoughts, but you can't unpack all of them.
We gave you an hour and told you don't go over.
That's right. So to unpack that a little bit, the real point blank meeting that I had with the administration of RPD is, I don't want to bring on 8 officers and 6 of them are busy and 2 aren't. What is that number? What is that magic number where we're not seeing a point of diminishing returns? Okay. And so they're working on that right now. They really want to put a lot of thought and a lot of due diligence into that optimal number of officers that are going to stay busy and have a real impact on the streets. And then once we know that, now we have a number, we have to make that a priority and we have to start budgeting towards that. I mean, that's all it comes down to. And that's a challenge because when it comes to the budget, you're handed almost the same pie every year. And then you have to find different ways to slice that. But that's our job, and that's what we'll figure out, and that's how we'll navigate it, and we'll get it done. So,
is the fire department doing the exact same thing? Are they coming to you with a number that they need, or do they have what they need to be able to cover the fires, do the ambulance runs and things
well,
of that
I
nature?
think Chief Purcell is doing an absolutely amazing job with the resources he has at his disposal. I mean, Chief Purcell is just doing fantastic at running that department. I think, of course, they could always use a few more hands on deck in the fire department. But I think he does a great job with what he has, and I want to take a harder look at what we can do on the streets with the drug houses, and then look at what Chief Purcell needs in manpower in the fire department next.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're spending some time with Richmond Mayor Dave Snow. Have a question for the mayor, send it to us via Facebook Live, via Twitter at WCTV Info, or you can give us a call, 973-8587. Send us an email to wctv@iue.edu. Many different ways to get your questions into the mayor, and we are taking those, and we'll make those a priority beyond anything that happens to come to my mind that I want to go through with him. We're talking a little bit about budgeting, and we'll come back to the speech in a little bit because there's a couple more points I want to go there,
Sure.
but we're talking about money and we're talking about budgeting. I had the Common Council here a number of weeks ago and talking about budget time. It's always going through. But there is a big part of the budget that ends up being people, and in particular, the sticking point for some council members through the years has been the union contracts. There is supposed to be a point in time when those contracts are done. How is that process going this year? And will it be off the table by the time we get to the budget so that we don't have council people going, I can't vote for this budget because it's not a real number because we don't have union contracts done?
You know, when I first took the office and that was brought to me as an issue, I was anxious to get through that first budget and union negotiation session to sort of see the inner workings of that and why that was an issue. Because I have a foot firmly planted in both sides of that. You know, I was meeting at the table with the union representation and then meeting directly with council and seeing absolutely both sides of this. After navigating through the first year of that, I got a much better understanding of really what was going on there. I really feel as though the way that the union negotiations had been handled were not establishing good faith in the negotiation side from the administration. And so I started to work really hard to fix that. There just wasn't a level of trust there that there should be. So I think from the union representation side, what they were thinking is the administration's going to hold back on us, but why would we go ahead and agree to this? Because we haven't yet seen what council will approve in the budget. There was no sense of good faith there. So I've really worked to reestablish that negotiation team, to change the way that team meets, to really establish a deeper level of communication and trust. And I'm taking it even one step further. In the next couple of weeks, I am bringing a negotiation training team here to the city to teach our negotiation team how to better handle themselves in these meetings, because that's what our union leadership deserves, is our team being able to handle themselves better and communicate better and establish a better level of trust. And furthermore, to separate the union negotiation meetings from labor management meetings, which are two different style of meetings. And what I found going through that the first time was that those had been sort of joined together, and that was very disruptive to the whole process. And so what I mean by that is, you know, when you're in the union contract negotiations, you're really there to talk about the contract language. When we're talking about, you know, wages and pensions and longevity, things like that. What I was hearing in those were issues that should be in labor management meetings. When are we getting new uniforms When are we going to get a new table in the break room? And I started to quickly realize, wait a second, there's too much being congealed here into one. We're never going to get through contract language when we're talking about a table that needs replaced in a break room. Because you can sit there at the table and say, we'll get that new table, but there's just more under that. So we need to have two different kinds of meetings. First, we need to train the team on how to better establish a level of communication and trust with the union leadership, which I'm doing that in the next couple of weeks. Okay. And then we need to separate those meetings so that they're having very productive meetings on both fronts, so they can deal with the issues in the environments in which they need to be dealt with and not try to hit it all at once in one big hodgepodge of a meeting. So in an ideal world, I'm not going to jinx myself, because you asked me point blank, will those be done? I'm not going to jinx myself like that. But I think if things go the way they should, we can see that kind of progression. But I'm not going to put any words in anybody's mouth. I want the union leadership to be happy with how those meetings are going. Okay. And if they have that good faith in the administration and they feel like they're being treated fairly, then it can definitely progress down that road. But there's more work to be done on that front. It had really eroded quite a bit. I mean, they hadn't had a signed contract with the AFSCME union since 2014. Right. There was a lot of erosion in the trust and the communication, and we've worked really hard to put it back. So,
are you making changes in the negotiation team for this year as opposed to the ones you had last year?
Yeah, you'll probably see some more changes, and I'm not finished with that yet. So you'll probably see a couple of changes as we move into that for this year. Yeah.
Okay. Lighting the city was something that you brought up. And Indianapolis, they had gone through the same thing. They had a moratorium on streetlights. Everybody talks about public safety, but then nobody wanted to put up additional lighting to make people safe walking down the street. You talked about that moratorium coming to an end and trying to make some changes. I know the Streetlight Committee has been doing some things. How's that front coming?
Yeah, and the first thing I need to do on that is really thank that Streetlight Committee. They're fantastic, and they've really done a lot of work to bring this to a reality. And so if you remember in the state of the city, and that's one of the things, as mayor, I get up and give the state of the city address and talk about all the wins we've had, but I'm doing it sort of on the backs of all these other people that are working so hard and doing such a great job. So I really have to give credit where it's due. The Streetlight Committee, Kelly Cruz Nicholson, Doug Goss, Gary Turner, they've worked really hard on this, and brought to me that importance and said, we've had this moratorium for years, and it's dark neighborhoods aren't safe neighborhoods. If you're going to talk about having all these safe neighborhoods, then we have to light them up. And so I'm very happy to report that moratorium ended actually today, about an hour before I got here. Our Board of Works approved a portion of Oak Park, so we'll have 13 new streetlights added to a portion of the Oak Park neighborhood, and we just keep going from there. And I think one of the reasons, I know one of the reasons that that's such a hot button issue, because I think people can ask, why does that take so long? Why did that portion of Oak Park, and we started there because they've been waiting the longest. I think they've been waiting 10, 12 years. Yeah. It's been a long time. It's not a one-time expense. You're adding an expense to the budget that's perpetual.
Correct.
And so that's between $6 and $7 per light per month, and that's forever. We can't add those, and then if times get tough, go to that neighborhood and say, well, Oak Park, I hope you enjoyed your lights for the last 3 years. We have to remove them because we have to make sure that we can pay for those. And so it's a lot of discussion. And so the way that we really decided to tackle that was, let's take it one tiny step at a time and just start to chip away at it. But at least lifting the moratorium and making some progress, it's a big deal. And so that happened today. I came in here to the studio today sort of walking a few inches off the ground because I feel great that it's been lifted. It's progress. And so big thanks to the Streetlight Committee and all the work they put into that. And thanks to Board of Works for seeing the need and approving that.
Is the plan now to kind of do an inventory of the neighborhoods and begin to figure out where some other areas like that need to be handled?
And they've already been doing that work. They've really put a lot of work into this. They've been putting together a project list to balance out residential and business, because we have some businesses that have also been waiting on streetlights as well. So they're balancing that out so they can, as they continue to go, they can stagger out residential lights, business lights, and start getting these lights. And it's sort of among us when we email each other about it, just the little sort of motivational phrases, light up Richmond. We're going to light up Richmond one little bit at a time. So we'll continue lighting up Richmond.
Cool. We're talking infrastructure. We're going to continue there. You were talking sidewalks and
Yes.
the infrastructure of the city during the State of the City address. Obviously, we're seeing, I think, unprecedented levels of infrastructure improvement. I'll call it that nicely.
Yeah.
Right now going on with our roads, and it will continue. We had Greg Steen, city engineer, in here along with Bob Warner and Nathan Riggs from NDOT talking about a number of the projects that are going to be going on. And I think as they started going through it, I think people started going, I can't get there from here. How are the sidewalks going to be improved, and what is it that you want to tell the citizens that are beginning to see orange barrels pop up all around the city? Because they're used to it on the interstate.
Right.
And a little bit here or there, but there's no direction you're going in the city where you're not going to see it.
All right, and as we get more into the nice weather, spring and summer, you're going to see a lot more.
Yes.
I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Well, let's start with the sidewalks. One of the reasons that we haven't done the sidewalk work for so long is because we had a lot of curb work to do in curb cuts. And you've been seeing a lot of that work the past few years where you keep seeing our street crews out making those nice ramps coming up on the curbs.
There was an ADA compliance issue that they were trying to get to, and there was a deadline involved in getting that finished, and I don't remember off the top of my head what that deadline is.
That was several years of work that it took to get to that point.
Yeah.
And that ADA guideline, it's a bit organic. It changes a lot.
Okay.
And so they had done some work already, and then some of the guidelines changed. They had to go back and rework some of those.
Government.
Yeah. But they finally kind of put a cap on that and said, we did it. We got it done. And they asked me, where do you want to go next? What's next? And I get a lot of emails and messages about sidewalks. And so we had to find a way to confine it somehow. We can't just say, let's just redo every sidewalk in the city. So we sort of put the guideline at 2 inches or over. If we see separation at 2 inches or more, then we'll come in and repair the sidewalk and a lot of the curbs while we're at it. People also talk to me a lot about curb conditions. Right. Now, since we have so much sidewalk work to do, we probably will not be in a position to go fix a curb just for the curb if the sidewalk is nice. But if we're already there working on the sidewalk and the curb needs work, we'll get that too. So that's, and you know, making that 5-year commitment to getting all those 2-inch and more problems solved in 5 years, that's a huge commitment. It's going to take a lot of work. But I feel very confident, our street commissioner, T.L. Bozell, feels very confident that with our sidewalk rating system, we're going to get that done. So now moving into the road cones and the road construction.
Before you leave sidewalks, I know you're talking about fixing some of the sidewalks that have those issues. Has any thought been given to putting in sidewalks in places where maybe they don't currently exist, where you've got particularly things where you're within a certain number of blocks of a school, where you've got students that can't walk on sidewalks, they're walking in the streets.
Sure.
It's bad enough in good weather. By the time it snows and snow's piling up, it's a nightmare for them.
That's a bit of a different process, but yes, there's been some talk about that. So to do that, it requires a whole different set of planning, a whole different level of planning and consideration. And that kind of goes back to that streetlight thing where then we have to take all those, look at them deeper and then prioritize and say, well, we can only do maybe 1 or 2 of these a year if we're lucky. So, but there are discussions about those. I actually have, at this moment, a note on my desk. It's right by my keyboard right now that a resident wrote me asking for a sidewalk. So we've gone out, looked at that area and said, is this feasible? How can we do this? When can we do it? Is there an area in greater need first? So that stays on the priority list. We just have to figure out where we can be most impactful in baby steps. So yes, the answer to that is yes. So in talking about the road construction, you know, there's very little way to sugarcoat the road construction.
But you're going to give it the old college try, right?
Boy, I'm going to try. It's just, the best way to put it is it's needed. And a city with a solid infrastructure and good roads that are well kept, well taken care of and repaired, that's a city that shines. And I know, it's like redoing your kitchen, Eric. You tear your kitchen apart, you take everything out of the cabinets, you put the drop cloths over the tables and everything, and somewhere in the middle of that work you say, this is a pain. This is a giant pain. But would you have wanted to just kept your ugly kitchen and never started it? Probably not. You just want to get through it, get it done, and it'll be done. But the thing I can't stress enough, that's the best I'm going to sugarcoat that, and it's not great, But the
I'm
thing
sorry.
It's okay. It's all right.
Good watching you squirm on this one.
I know. It's going to be a pain. I know it is. It's going to be a pain for everybody.
It is. You're going to get some really nasty grams
Absolutely.
during this next year.
And that's fine. That's my job. That's fine. You want to be upset with the mayor about the road construction. That's what I'm here to do. What I want to stress, though, and what you're going to hear me say again and again and again here when I do radio interviews and I'm not talking to groups is I know you're inconvenienced. I know it's a pain. I know it slows down traffic, but it cannot come at a cost to our local businesses in the heart of the city. You have to get downtown and shop and eat. Our local businesses are the lifeblood of our city, sure. And the road work is essential, but you can't stop shopping at all the great stores downtown. So that's what I'm asking of everybody. Like I know that I'm asking on top of an ask. Like I'm asking you to navigate this construction so that we can have better streets and better infrastructure. But I'm going to take it a step up and say, you may have to walk a little farther. It may be a pain to get through there, but don't take Center City out of your daily plans because of some road cones. You know, those businesses rely on us, and it's vital that we shop. You hear it all the time. People say money spent at local businesses is multiplied 7 times in a community.
Sure.
And those are real numbers. Those are real things. And so I'm actually working on a marketing campaign right now to really encourage people to get through it, go through that, jump those extra hurdles to continue to patronize our local businesses. And I'm calling it paving the way. So, you know, yes, it's a pain, but we're literally paving the way to a better shopping experience and a better eating experience and better navigation of downtown and better streets. And so, yeah, it's a pain, but continue to support our local businesses anyway.
A lot of it will actually be done during this year, so it's not a lot of it's not going to stretch over.
There'll be a peak, though. There'll be a peak in the nice warm months where July-ish, June.
See, I was trying to help you out. You just
No, I want to be honest about it. I'll be honest about it. I know it's going to be a pain. I work at the city building. I mean, at some point I'm going to have to go to lunch and come back, and it's going to be a pain for me too. So.
Well, and you mentioned the city building. You're seeing it as Wayne County, and I mentioned we've got Kim Poust on next week, has been doing things with their sidewalks and around even that area between the courthouse and annex on 4th Street has been a nightmare for a couple of weeks as they've tried to do some upgrading along there. So it's all over.
We have to deal with it. But when we get finished with all this, we're going to shine as a city. That's what's so exciting about it. So. I see it, that's why I use that kitchen remodeling analogy, you know. You see what it is, you kind of have that vision of what it can be, but then you got to go through that real pain stage to get it there so you can show it off and show everybody how great it is. And I just know it's going to be beautiful when it's all finished. I'm excited.
Okay.
You have to be a mayor to be really excited about a street, by the way.
But I would guess that would be the case.
That's what makes mayors unique. We get very excited about streets.
About streets.
We look at pictures of asphalt and say, that's beautiful. That's beautiful asphalt. It's a strange breed, Eric. Yes. It's a strange breed.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV, Channel 11. We're spending some time with Richmond Mayor Dave Snow. We are taking your questions, 973-8587. Send a question via Facebook Live, via Twitter at WCTV Info, or you can send an email to wctv@iue.edu. Thanks to the staff who's doing this, Steve Michael on camera, Ryan Harris handling the direction here. We greatly appreciate their support as you talk about giving people their due. I get to sit here and just kind of, you know, kid around with you for a while. They're actually doing
They do a great job,
the
too.
work.
Yeah.
There was an area that you went to that kind of surprised me at, near the end. Talking about the negativity that you find, particularly on social media.
Yeah.
It seemed like an interesting place to go for a mayor in a State of the City address. What prompted you to travel that road, and what has been the response to that part of it in particular? Because it was a little bit pointed.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
It's something I'm really passionate about. I guess it comes from, I've lived in the city my whole life. You know, I grew up here, and it's not as though I lived a type of life that I was separated from the constant Richmond bashing. Richmond's terrible. It's awful. Get out of town. And I had a lot of friends that thought that way and said that frequently. And the more I continued to make my life here, the more I thought I was crazy for doing that. So I've always had sort of that passion. You know, I can do a lot here. This is a great city. And one of the things that excited me most about being mayor was taking that passion and to that center stage and sort of broadcasting it out. And what just drives me crazy is just the constant negativity, this town has nothing to offer. You know, whenever anything bad happens that can happen in any other city, you know, and does on a weekly basis, it's made out to be, well, this only happens here because this city's terrible, and it just, I can't help it. I'm really passionate about it, and so. When I talk to people that come to me and say that they also hate it, and a lot of people, it has a bigger effect, I think, than anybody realizes. Okay. It does because, matter of fact, I was talking to a local business owner who started his business in Ohio and then chose Richmond as a location for one of his stores. Yeah. And he said, I didn't know much about Richmond, but I thought, you know, as I looked at a map, Richmond might be a good place for a new location. So I went on the internet, and what I found first was a social media group. I won't point it out specifically. And he said, so I clicked on it and I started reading, and I thought, maybe not. Maybe Richmond's not the place. And he said, then I did a little more digging and thought, maybe it is actually. So that negativity oftentimes literally ends up becoming the front page. It takes center stage, and it's the first thing people see, because before people do a windshield tour of Richmond, they do the internet tour. And then they click and they see that and they think, maybe not. And I can't, no, because that's the wrong message. The fact is, we are a city worth seeing. We're an amazing city. I would put this city up against any other city any day. And so just being really passionate about it. So going back to what I was saying, you get me conversational like this outside of a speech, and I just ramble. I'm a rambler at heart.
That's why we give you 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
It's okay.
The mayor's going to ramble. We know that. So when people come to me and they say, I just hate seeing all this constant negativity, I say, well, stand up and do something about it. And they go, it doesn't do any good. You know, it's tiring. And I really, so saying it in the state of the city, it wasn't necessarily about pinpointing anybody or sending a direct message to anybody. It was about giving everybody else that sort of empowerment and encouragement and that permission sort of to say, yeah, I do want to fight for this city. I do want to stand up and defend this city. So that's kind of what I was hoping that would inspire people to do, because I think too often people think, well, if the general consensus says it's bad, then maybe it's bad. I kind of want to stand up and say it's not bad, but maybe everybody else is going to tell me I'm wrong.
I'm alone.
Yeah, and kind of making people feel like you're not alone. There's a lot of people telling me, how do I stand up and say I'm so tired of the negativity, you know? And so I just came out and said it. Fight against it. Stand up for your city and say Richmond's awesome. You know, that's what I want people to do. So that's really what that was about. Being positive.
Okay.
Being that positive narrative about who we really are. We have a lot of great things to offer, so I want people to share that story.
We do have a lot of great things to offer. You've been at this job for a little over a year now. Obviously, first time in the political arena, as it were, trying to be a public servant, stepping into something brand new, completely different from what you were doing. You've been through one full year, one full cycle, and it normally takes people at least that long to see some of everything. You hadn't seen the budget process. You hadn't seen, you know, you hadn't seen your first snow as mayor and gotten yelled at for not getting the streets clean. What surprised you about the position in the first year? Just out of curiosity.
The thing that surprised me the most, I would say that there's a lot. I will remember this now for the rest of my life, that any candidate that's running for any office, we very rarely see candidates run for an office that have held it before. You don't often see a mayor, council member, governor, president that was in that office 5-10 years ago and is running for it again. So people are usually fairly new when they're stepping in. And so I will remember for the rest of my life that every candidate, all of them, will get into the office once elected and then find out there's so much more than you were ever able to see from the outside looking in. partly because you're just not that close to it, and partly because you just don't have those permission levels to see it all.
Right.
And so the only way that I've been able to break this down into an analogy, this is my silly little funny analogy that I give to this all the time when I'm talking to people about it, is I say, imagine a giant banquet table, and it's stacked 5 feet tall in dirty dishes. So tall in dirty dishes and plates and silverware and cups that no one even knows where to begin. So there's an election held. Who's going to clean this table off? And everybody stands up. You stand up, Eric, and say, I'll clean this table off. And so you go through that. They pick somebody and they say, Eric, we've chosen you. Get to work and clean this mess up. And then finally you put the apron on and you say, I got it. Only then does someone step in and say, before you take that stack of plates off, the leg is broken under the table. And if you take that stack of plates, the whole thing's going to tip. And you say, nobody ever told me the leg was broken. I didn't even know that. I thought we needed a dishwasher, but we need a carpenter. Okay, that's fine. Everyone stop what you're doing. Let's find a carpenter first. And that's kind of what it's like. That's the best way that I know how to break it into an analogy. There's a lot that you learn once you sit at a desk. And you think you got a pretty good handle on this. And they go, but there's this. Okay. And you just kind of take those as they come and you figure out how to navigate through those. But in all honesty, if in your heart your best interest is in the city and for the people that live in the city and the people that work for the city, you'll get through it. You'll lose a lot of sleep in the I'm talking to all the future mayors out there, by the way. You'll lose a lot of sleep, but you'll get through it.
I've always said that those public servants who run and say, on day one in office, I'm going to.
Oh, right. Probably not. Probably not going to happen. Yeah. Day one in the office, you just might not be able to log into the computer because you don't know the password. That might be day one in office. That's the reality, you know. So,
what keeps you going after the first year in this? You've learned some things, good and bad.
Yeah.
What keeps you going? What drives you?
I would honestly say every bit of it. I just can't tell you how much I love this job. It's fantastic. I love the challenges. There's rewards along the way. Sometimes you have to make the effort to find them. My job is to give away the glory and take the blame. At the end of the day, that's really what it is. You know, the department heads of this city, they're the ones that deserve all the real glory for all the work that gets done. You know, TL Bozell is making sure your streets are repaired and your potholes are fixed and your snow is plowed and trees are taken care of and leaves are picked up. That's a lot of work. And Denise Retz, I can't even say enough great about what she's doing with our park system. And by the way, I'm overly nostalgic with those flowers on the hill that say it's spring.
I saw those.
When I hired Denise, that was the very first thing I asked her to do.
Really?
Yeah, that's a true story. You can ask her. When I very first hired her, I said, you know, welcome aboard. So thrilled to have you. I want those flowers back on the hill that say it's spring. And so, you know, Denise had worked at the park before, and she said, oh, well, Mayor, you know the reason that the park stopped doing that. It's because the squirrels eat the bulbs, and it's kind of a pain to do. And I said, that's great, but if we can put a rover on Mars, I'm pretty sure we can put the flowers back on the hill. So let's figure it out. And she said, okay, I'm not really in a position to argue with you, so we'll figure it out. And by golly, she figured it out. So seeing those flowers on that hill again, I mean, is it nostalgic to you? I'm overly cheesy about it. I'll be really honest.
I won't say it's overly nostalgic to me. I didn't grow up here like you grew up here. But it was nice to see. I drove by it a week ago, as a matter of fact, and saw it. And they were out. And I went, you know what? That is actually pretty.
Man, it's great.
It gives you a little hope. For somebody like me that's not crazy about winter.
Right, me neither.
To see that goes, okay, it is just around the corner, it is just around the corner. Even though this hasn't been a bad winter, it doesn't matter. It's been winter, it's been cloudy, it's been...
You know, the very, very best message I got out of that, it was so simple. It was a person that sent me an email. Just out of the blue, she sent an email and said, I was driving down 40 with my daughter in the back seat of the car, and my daughter said, oh, that's really cool, that was a good idea. And I said, no, when I was a kid, they did that every year. And my daughter said, really? And she said, it was this great moment of connection with me and my daughter in the car talking about what it was like growing up here. So she just said thanks. And I was like, oh man, nothing will get better than that. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. So I'm so happy to see those. So, but anyway, it's the department heads that do all the work, you know. And so I recharge my battery by doing community events. I know that for some people that sounds weird. I'm a true extrovert at heart.
Yes.
And so going out and serving food at Townsend, delivering meals on Christmas Day with Bethesda, I really recharge in those community events. So when people call the office and say, can you come out and be a part of this whatever community event, if my calendar will at all allow it, absolutely. I'll go out and do whatever I can, because that's where I find my energy. It's really being out there, helping and volunteering, talking to the community, helping with some local event, whatever it is. I love that stuff. Of course I do. I mean, I created City Fit, I created City Life, I was the race director of the Fireworks 5K. I mean,
You've been involved in it since before
I love that
you started.
Stuff. It makes me so happy to do that stuff. So,
you're talking about your department heads and the people working in the administration. It has some changes happen. New controller, Beth Fields, was running kind of metropolitan development. You've merged some things. How is that coming along? One, the controller's office, because that's the money piece of the pie.
Right.
And that is an office that has been in a state of flux, again, being nice, for a few years now. Are we about there? Controller, deputy,
we are.
It's been fun, but bye.
Right. We are days away, probably less than a week away from announcing a deputy controller.
Okay.
So that's coming very, very, very soon. You'll see that news, and that's really exciting. When it comes to the team that the department heads themselves build, I really let them make those calls. But sometimes I'll ask to interview their final candidates, and so I was able to sit in with the final select few candidates for deputy controller and just have a chance to talk to each of the candidates. There were three, all three very strong and very capable, and Beth will make that final decision, and she'll have a deputy controller in the office, and that's just really exciting. So we're making that progress. Nice. So the team building has been really important to me, not only to build a really strong team, but a team that works well together, that communicates with each other, and that is a lasting team that's working for this city and working the right way. And they're all doing that.
And you've taken your time in doing that, and I will even say, even standing out at the front desk out here, I've gone, man, we don't have a controller. We don't have a, where are we in this deal? You know, was this a little bit bigger than what he thought it was going to be?
No.
And are you where you want to be with that? But you're still a year in, and you're still kind of tweaking some things.
Yeah. You know, one of my strongest assets going into this that I talked a lot about during the campaign is my expertise in team building. I've always been a really strong team builder. Part of having expertise in team building is knowing when to take your time and knowing when not to jump the gun and knowing when not to give into pressures. And so I've been through a lot of candidates for a lot of positions, but if they don't fit, they don't fit. And sometimes I get pressure internally from that, and they say, you've interviewed 5 people for a position, you're not choosing any of them. No, I'm not. We're going to keep looking because none of the 5 of them were right. And so we're going to keep going until the right person is here that I know can do this job the right way for this city. And so it's taken a while. It has.
Yeah.
But it has paid off in dividends because our team is phenomenal. I'm so proud of that team every day. They do a really good job. So
when that deputy controller is in, because my assumption is because that office is light, there's still a contract with UMBAW. The city is still making some payments there. Is the idea that they will go away, or will they always now be a consultant for the city and there always be a contract?
Yeah, ideally, absolutely. The point will be to lessen the reliance that we have on UMBAW. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think with the addition that we're going to make with deputy controller and Beth's strengths as a controller, we're definitely going to lessen that reliance for sure. It's going to take a little time, but we'll get there. So.
The position that Beth left is still open. Is there more restructuring in that office, or are you looking for somebody to now step into that position?
I just finished a round of interviews for infrastructure and development director, so you'll be seeing that announcement as well in the very near future. So more announcements coming on the team that I'm really excited about. So it's been a good process. And Beth was fantastic as director of infrastructure and development. The more that I worked with Beth, the more that I saw that she could be much better utilized in the office of controller. And so that's why I made that move. What I really needed in that chair was somebody that didn't only have a good grasp of finance, but could marry that with visioning and project management and looking ahead and coming to me and saying, and being very proactive and coming to me and saying, here's a way that I think if we start looking at this right, here's what we could be in 3 or 4 years. Like, look at this, And Beth really possesses that toolkit. So that's really when I started thinking, boy, Beth would really be powerful in the controller's seat. And then finding a deputy controller to flesh out that office all the way that it needs to be. And then we can really move strong. And so thinking 5 months from now, when the deputy controller is in the chair and has had some work and has had some experience, and the way that that office is going to move and flow, that's really exciting. So, and it hasn't for many years. So we'll finally be back to a full strength, well-moving machine in there.
Okay. You talked a little bit ago, we were talking about social media, and sometimes that's the first place that people get a vision of this city. What still needs to happen with the city's website for it to be the kind of welcoming, open, first salvo that you want people to see?
I've had a lot of conversations with our IT director, Randy Coons, about what, one of the main conversations that I've tasked him with is, can we build on what's there, or is it so far outdated that we have to start brand new with a whole new foundation? So he's been looking at that, and what he's been doing to look into that is kind of surveying all the different departments and what they need to get out of the city site to make it effective. I know that our Parks Department really wants to transition at some point into an online reservation system for shelters and the Don's Cabin and Mac Shack and all that. So can we build on that platform that we have now, or do we need to invest in an all-new foundation to move forward? And that's what he's working on. So once we get a better handle on that, then we can build a better website. Now, talking about the site itself, we were talking before the show started about the economic development course that I took at Ball State. And while I was there, one of the things that we discussed is being able to go to a city's website and very quickly determine whether you want to look at community amenities. Are you wanting to see parks? Are you wanting to see things from a more job-related side? And what kind of dashboard can we set up in real time that shows people the information they're looking for? And one of the things I don't want to do is duplicate the work that the EDC already does. They do a fantastic job. So if I need to point from the city site directly to them, then so be it. But if there's data that I can share right on the city site, then let's do that. Basically what it boils down to is not having fatal flaws on that first impression. If someone is looking to Richmond for whatever reason, to move their business, to move here to work, to come vacation for 3 days, to live here, whatever it is, what are the things that would take us out of the running immediately that they won't see? So what can we show right off the bat that piques your interest and says, well, I need to dig a little deeper here, and keep them a little longer so they can find out a little more about who we are? So that's kind of the basis on which the site will be built once we get to that point.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11, spending time with Richmond Mayor Dave Snow. You can get your questions in, 973-8587. Send an email to wctv@iue.edu. Send a tweet to WCTV Info, or we're on Facebook Live tonight, and you can send your question through that. You just said something that brings up two different ways I want to go. So first of all, the economic development course that you took at Ball State, a week-long course. You talked even during the campaign about where you thought the mayor's role in economic development was. Now that you've been in the job for a year, have your thought processes changed from campaign to actual being there and being part of that? And two, what drove you to take that economic development course, and how has it changed your thinking on economic development for the city? Has my thought process changed on economic? I would say I would use the word tweaked, because once I actually got in and was able to work closer with our EDC, it gave me a better and deeper understanding of their role and what they're doing. And the last thing that I want to do is, like I said, duplicate their services. I certainly don't want to impede on what they're doing, because they're doing a great job. And I don't want to do nothing and say, well, why am I playing a role in that? You know, our EDC's got that covered. I don't have a role in that. I feel like that's not the approach to take either. And so taking that course gave me an even better understanding, so that I'm more well-rounded in my understanding of economic development. And so from taking that course and learning about how I could be more impactful, most of the people that were in the course already fill Valerie's role. They were people that are working in economic development. Here I wasn't the only mayor, but I was one of only two that were in the course.
And so from that was born what I talked about in the State of the City, the big plan. So my background was in marketing and advertising, and I always try to take something very big and break it down into something that's easily digestible. So we have something with a lot of moving parts, but how do we simplify it? Sort of the face of the clock. You know, behind there is 9 million gears and things are moving, but the front, simple and easy to understand. And that's why I came up with the big plan. Because from that learning that I went through and the other research that I've done, I came back with what we need to focus on, starting in the heart of our city, is that business retention and expansion piece, so that we know that our local businesses can work easily with City Hall to get the things done they need to get done, and they can expand, because we'll always get more wins out of local businesses being successful and being able to expand. So business retention and expansion, that was the B. The I was infrastructure, which we've talked a lot about, making sure that we're investing in that. We have a good, strong infrastructure. And then the G is population growth. And so knowing how I can impact each of those areas specifically and do my role, I think is very, very important in making sure that I'm being as vital as I can in the arena of city economic development.
Okay. The other thing that you kind of touched on that I want to continue, and when you talk about economic development, and we'll deal with this on a little bit later on too, is one of your initiatives during your first year was workforce development.
Absolutely.
You were very specific when the Blue Buffalo announcement was made that you need the citizens of Richmond to be ready for the jobs that are coming in. That was a priority. How has that push gone? What are you still doing to help drive that, and particularly the organizations that you first introduced in that first salvo? How have they seen any changes from this push?
Sure. You know, when I did that video, which has been viewed now almost 20,000 times on social media. Isn't that amazing?
That is.
Yeah, almost 20,000 views, which I feel great about that. It was really about connecting the dots. So the reason I made that video, I got to back up a little bit so that we have a deep understanding of why I did that. Because I've had several people say, why did you jump into that? Why did you make a video about telling people use these resources to get into work?
Right.
So
and they were Work One was here. Richmond Adult Education was part of it. NATCO Empowerment Center was part of it. Excel Center and Ivy Tech Manufacturing Matters were the ones that were there.
So I spend a lot of time out in the community, just talking to people. And coming up this summer, actually, so during the campaign, it's very common that you go out and walk neighborhoods. Sure. And I just think that that's silly to do that only for a campaign. So I've already told my assistant, schedule me in some neighborhoods this summer. I want to go walk neighborhoods. I loved that. I loved just going door to door and talking to the people of the city. So I still continue that in some ways, going out and talking to people. And I will often ask them, just point blank, you hired me to do a job. What's your expectation of me? You know, I don't want to someday be on the other side of this and you feel as though I didn't meet your expectations. What do you expect of me as mayor? And a lot of people say, well, I really hope you bring more jobs. And I found that to be a very interesting sort of knee-jerk response out of people when I ask them their expectation of me, the mayor. I hope you bring more jobs. And what I sort of came to realize is I think that's some people's way of saying, I'm concerned about our local economy, and I assume that more jobs will fix it. So bring more jobs. So now I go and I get to sit in meetings with hirers and business owners and business managers, and I'm hearing them say, we can't fill these jobs. And I found that was a stark revelation, I guess, going back to what were some of the things that surprised me. So they would say, we can't fill these jobs. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. When I'm on the streets, people say, we don't have enough jobs. When I'm in here in these meetings, you're saying, we can't fill all the jobs we have. Some of these are very good paying jobs.
There's a disconnect there somewhere.
Very big disconnect. So I started asking questions to the business side. What's keeping people from getting the jobs? And the responses that I got were just kind of like a punch in the stomach, because it wasn't difficult stuff. It was people showing up. You know, the candidate showed up to the interview wearing pajama pants. You know, the candidate was in the interview and answered their cell phone, so we stopped the interview. I get a lot of can't pass a drug test, and just these very simple things. Occasionally, it's could not meet the qualifications of the position. Things like that. Like, we have specialized machinery here. We need somebody that knows how to operate this special machinery. They didn't have that. And the very stark revelation in that was everything to fix those issues is already here in this city. It would be a very different conversation if we were saying we really need resources here to help people navigate into the workforce. That's not the conversation we're having. This is simply a matter of utilizing the dots that are in place, navigating through the dots and connecting the dots. If you don't have the clothes for an interview, then NATCO Empowerment Community Center has that clothing, which they give away. It's called the Career Closet. If you're not comfortable with the way that you write a resume, they take you through resume writing and mock interviews. Work One does that as well. They will sit you down in a mock job interview so you can find your flaws. We talked about fatal flaws a little bit ago.
Right.
Same thing happens in a job interview. You've interviewed potential employees.
Yes.
And we all know there are certain things you can say or do that instantly the person across the desk says, I'm not.
It glaze over.
I'm not hiring this person. In your mind you're already done, but you'll finish up the interview anyway. You have to learn that. Some of us, I think, take for granted that that's a skill that's been lost. So that's why I made that video, to try to bridge that gap. And I will tell you, I started challenging the business side of that and saying, when you turn these people away, are you just saying, okay, you showed up in pajama pants, you conducted yourself inappropriately in the interview, I'm done with you forever? Or are you steering them back into the resources that are here? And often I get, no, we don't have time for that. So I've sort of challenged them and said, start steering them into the resources and say, if you go get this training, come back and tell me you got it. And if they do that, they must really want the job. So we don't need to keep just adding jobs just for the sake of adding them. We'll continue to expand the horizons of economic development. We got Blue Buffalo coming, Alma Casting is coming. We've had 4 economic development announcements. We're going to talk about that. That put us 32nd in the nation for a micropolitan city. We have the advancements, but you have to take that initiative to get the training and the skills to navigate into those jobs. It's not your grandpa's manufacturing facility anymore. It doesn't work that way. It used to be you could come out of high school and go work at the shop and be a general laborer. It doesn't work that way at all. My father has worked at Richmond Casting for almost 30 years. And those guys have had to go through computer training because the machines that they're getting in for pouring molten steel, now they've got a computer screen and they all have to learn that. It's not your grandpa's shop anymore.
It's changing.
And so I'm still doing Work Shirt Wednesdays to showcase the local workforce, and I do those with Manufacturing Matters. So I'm trying to
tell people what that is, because obviously some people have heard about you doing that. They may have seen it on social media. But let's not assume that everybody knows Work Shirt Wednesdays. Talk a little bit about that initiative that you've been doing.
So we just put the call out that any local manufacturing facility can invite me. It doesn't have to be manufacturing. It could be any local business. But I really like to showcase our manufacturing base. And
that's what a lot of people care about.
Yeah.
That is what they believe are the best jobs that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they invite me and I come out and they give me one of their work shirts that I wear, take a tour and just talk about the company. Kim Thurlow from Manufacturing Matters joins me on those tours. And then afterwards we do a big social media push and say, the last one we did was Paragon Caskets. And I learn a tremendous amount. I love it. I love seeing the manufacturing process. And you learn that we have this tremendous history of manufacturing. The casket manufacturing business, for example.
It's big around here.
It's huge, and it's a real skill and a real trade. I walk into this company that produces all these caskets, and almost everything is being done by hand. There's not a machine just stamping out caskets and just kicking them off an assembly line. These are a bunch of guys that are spot welding caskets, and they're explaining to me how specific the welding is, because you have to have a light touch and it's a certain kind of welding. Then they're hand stitching the liners, and it's fascinating.
Wow.
And so, and to know that those guys running that company, Craig and Lenny, could use more employees, and I'm on the streets hearing you need to bring more jobs, but you could learn how to build a casket, which is a great trade and something that you can always have with you because not everybody knows how to do that. And that's available right here in Richmond. So again, go through Manufacturing Matters, learn how to use that spot welder, and you can start building caskets and make a good living. So that's what I'm trying to kind of showcase and teach everyone.
Okay. what you talked about, what you kind of led into a little bit, you and I ended up in the same spot, and if we keep doing that, people are going to start to talk. But this past Tuesday, we were both at the Rural Urban Banquet.
Yeah.
Second year that I've been there. Dr. Michael D. Wilcox, Director of Purdue Center for Regional Development, was there talking about stronger communities together. Good news, bad news in some ways with what he did. Talking about population loss, but also talking about some of the opportunities and some of the good things that have been happening here. And you'll see the whole Rural Urban Banquet. We're going to pull that together and put it on the air here in a couple of weeks. But here's a piece, and I want to talk a little bit about those two things because we're there. Here's a little bit of piece of what he had to say.
Red is where we saw significant population declines, none larger than in Pulaski County. But as you'll see, and all of you are looking for Wayne right now, that reverse L is exactly where the Eastern Indiana Regional Planning Commission is. It's those counties. And so every single county in the region here lost population since 2010. What IU was showing was just between last year and this year. We decided to take it back to just after the recession and see what's been going on here, not only in this region, but across the state of Indiana. We can see that there's significant population increases and some significant population declines. Okay, we need to be aware of this, and we need to be thinking about why this happens, but we also need to recognize that there's a lot of opportunity here. So I was surprised to know that virtually no one knows this news that I have to share with you. How many of you read Site Selection magazine? You guys were actually recognized as being tied for 32nd in the entire United States for your economic development efforts this past year for micropolitan communities. You were recognized. That's the list of 100, I think it's 130 that are there from across the United States. Right next door, Ohio had the most, head and shoulders above all the other micropolitan communities in aggregate in the country. But Indiana was about 7th in the entire United States, and leading the way was Angola with 5 projects, and Richmond was right behind with 4 projects. And these economic development projects include $1 million investments, or they look at square footage, and these would be investments that had 20,000 square feet or more. So these are new jobs in this community.
Some good news, bad news.
Yeah.
This area, everybody knows one of the things that they've complained about, nobody wants to be here, there's nothing going on, let's get out of Dodge. So we've had the population loss, particularly in this region. But on the flip side, some of exactly what you've been talking about, there are jobs here that are going unfilled. As mayor, looking at economic development, looking at how to grow things, one, you've already started trying to explain to the workforce there are jobs here, you just have to get the skills there. How do you build on this area? Quality of life in particular is huge, something that for a long time the discussion about spending economic development money on quality of life was just like, no, we're not going to do that. To build up the population, because there are jobs, there are more jobs, and we need people to fill those jobs, and we need people to grow this area. So how much of that stays, those two dynamics stay as part of your conversation and what you're moving toward?
You know, backing up to the very beginning of what you said, when you said people saying, there's nothing going on here, get out of Dodge. You know, and I realize I'm being very sarcastic here, but the people that say, we're going back to that whole negativity aspect, there's nothing in Richmond. What a terrible place that has a beautiful downtown that's still growing and still thriving, beautiful Depot District, beautiful Center City, beautiful park system, Veterans Park and Star Jeanette Plaza, the brand new Elstro Plaza, that has a symphony orchestra, a thriving theater, a community orchestra, a beautiful art museum, you know, and then almost leading Indiana. He said the #1 city in Indiana had 5. We had 4 economic development announcements, and 32nd in the nation. Clearly, this is not the place to be, Eric. Clearly, you know, is that really the fact, or do people just repeat that because somebody else told them, oh, this town's terrible. Oh, Joe said it's terrible. It must be terrible.
And I was very surprised by his announcement there. I knew, obviously, because of, you know, we're sitting in a lot of meetings, that some things have been going on. But to be where Richmond is
Right.
in that way.
Yeah.
It's definitely
And
a
I've said
good
it many
thing.
times. I said it again in the State of the City. I said I feel like Richmond is on the verge of its next great renaissance, but we've got to capture the right positives. And that's really how I led into the drowning out the negativity.
Right.
We've got to capitalize on the positives, and they are far outweighing the negatives right now. So we got to capitalize on that and move forward on it so that we're capturing that renaissance and growing the way we deserve to grow. So as you talk about economic development and quality of life, I really think that one of the major issues with that is that it's always been discussed as an and or. What are you going to do? Where are you going to put it? And
Sure.
it cannot exist that way. It's got to be interdependent. You know, they have to be intertwined. We have to always balance our quality of life elements with our, and we're doing that. You know, we talked about the construction downtown. You see the brand new Elstro Plaza, which everybody fell in love with at the Ice Festival.
Yeah.
If you remember when that announcement was first made, there was all this, oh, why Elstro Plaza? Why are we doing this? But then everybody came out to the Ice Festival and said, this is fantastic. Having this downtown, this is amazing. And as people were coming to my office and starting to share with me some of the activities that we're going to see in that park this summer, it's going to be so much fun. The library is doing an amazing event out there where they're going to create, it's going to be like dominoes made out of books, out of thousands of books all around
Wow.
Elstro. Yeah, and then one lucky kid's going to get to start that first one, and we're going to watch this big domino of books. Elstro's going to be a blast all the time. So balancing these things out so that this is a place where people want to come and bring their career with them, but while working to provide jobs for the people that are here and to bring them to want those jobs, that's how we start to turn that population piece around. And when I first took office, people were really talking to me as though the population decline had just started. It was a new thing. Dave, you got to turn this around, Mayor Snow. So we started doing some digging. I said, you know, that's not good enough. I want to know when this really started. So we started digging through a lot of reports and papers and found that the first documented decline in population was of the 10-year census in 1970. So probably somewhere between the mid-60s to late 60s, it actually started the downtick.
Okay.
And is that shocking to you? Because it
That
was
is
to me.
shocking to me.
I
I thought it
no
was
idea.
later than that.
Yeah, so did I.
I did.
And people talk to me about it like it just started in the 90s. No, it goes back to the mid to late 60s. It was first reported in 1970 in the 10-year census. So I thought, man, if it took this long, you know, how long is it going to take to fix? Let's start chipping away at it. If we can see the tiniest little uptick at this point, that'll be considered a huge victory. And I feel like we're putting in the pieces in place to see that. There's a lot more work to be done. There's a very, very long road ahead before we ever even see a finish line coming. But if we can see a tiny uptick, we can celebrate that as a small victory along the way, you know, a milestone.
Are we putting the pieces in place that will bring in the young people that we need to really kind of grow their family, buy homes, that type of thing?
I think so, absolutely. There's always going to be some amenities for certain people that we're not going to have.
Sure.
I've talked to some young people who say they're going to move away.
We're not going to have a Palladium.
Yeah, and I try to fight that. I say, tell me why you want to move away. What is it you want? Because the thing that I challenge young people with all the time, I go and talk to schools, I talk to our local colleges, and I say, as you're dreaming about the life that you want to have someday, if you don't see what you want here to build that, I want you to come tell me. Tell me what's missing. Tell me that missing component, because we can work together to try to put that here. And a couple of them have said, we don't have mountains. I want to be a mountain climber. Okay, you're right. We're not going to have that. You're going to go off to Denver, and that's all there is going to be to it.
The highest point in the state of Indiana is not far from here, and that's not
right.
a mountain.
It's a rock. You get to stand on it. I've been up there. So those people are going to go, and they're going to travel. But I think a huge component of this are the people that didn't leave for mountains, and they didn't leave here to go kayaking. They left here just because they thought the grass was greener elsewhere and the better opportunities were elsewhere.
Right.
And it's really time to start working hard to put them here and put that call out and say, it's time to come home because better is here now. And I really think we're on the path to do that. With adding companies like Blue Buffalo, I mean, these are very good jobs, and these are very quality jobs with the nation's leader in pet food manufacturing. So we can make better home now.
But there are a number of the jobs in not just here, but in the state of Indiana that keep people, to a certain extent, working poor. We have a very high poverty rate here in this area, and it's not just people that aren't working and aren't taking care of themselves. How do you use the bully pulpit that you've used relatively effectively in your first year to talk to the business community about the state of Indiana, as we've heard even from the state level, number one for being able to bring jobs? It's a low cost of doing business, but that low cost of doing business also means that maybe they're not paying the wages that need to be paid so that our residents can take advantage of those things. How do you use your bully pulpit on that side of the equation for the residents that are trying to make it, that are trying to do for their families, that are trying to buy homes, and we need that?
We do need that. Home ownership plays a big role in all of this. There's a few ways to look at that. You got the micro and the macro. On the macro side of it, that's a national issue. We can, if we want, we can draw a circle around Richmond and call it our issue. It's a much bigger issue. We have people all over the country, people that have even taken up signs and gone on marches and saying we need more at this base level. I'm going to leave that national side to the national side and focus it down into us. And there's a lot of ways that we can impact that locally. As we add more economic development opportunities, it brings competition for the workforce to keep their workers. And that benefits everybody in wages. When we bring in a company that has machinery that other people in the city already know how to use, that sort of puts out the alert that we're going to lose these people to this. We better raise the wages, and that tells them, well, if we want these people, and you see what kind of begins there. The other avenue that absolutely has to be capitalized on is we have educational institutions here that will train you. You don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree, but a technical certificate in a lot of this equipment will go a long way in navigating you to those higher paying jobs. Because that's why I said earlier, it's not your grandpa's shop anymore. There's a real delineation made in the 21st century between someone that has a skill, and that can just come from a technical certificate, to someone that's just at the general level. And it's hard once you're here to get over there. And there's some things that we can do as a city. I'm already having our transportation department look at how do we provide better transportation. Can we set up a dedicated school route to get people to Ivy Tech better? Can we do a separate work route if people need to ride to work? What role can I play in that? But while I'm working on that, you out there should be looking at what certificates you can obtain to navigate yourself into that gainful employment in the workforce, because it's a changing and competitive workforce, and you got to have the training and the skills to compete in there.
But as they have the training and the skills, are the salaries that they're getting equivalent to what they need to be? Now, I'm not saying pay the same thing here as what you're going to pay in Chicago, Detroit, New York. Living in those cities is a completely different thing. But the state as a whole has an issue with some of the pay that our people are working. Do we need to, as a city, and I asked the city council this, begin to look at what is the bottom line threshold for a tax abatement? There's a dollar figure built into that. Is that something that needs to be looked at? Does that need to push the level a little bit? And I'm not anti-business, and I'm not saying bankrupt, but there are two sides of this. We want things good for the business community because we want those businesses here, but we want those people working in those businesses to also be able to do what needs to be done so that the city sees some benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, I know that our tax abatement committee, as they review those, they already put constraints on those abatements to make sure that they're hiring local and things like that. So if wages need to be considered in that, I would definitely welcome a conversation with council's tax abatement committee if they wanted to have a discussion about whether or not that should be included. I mean, I think, though, it's important to remember, though, that the training is the clear jumping of that gap, and will put you on the other side of that sort of barrier where you get stuck. But if council wants to have that discussion as a tax abatement committee, I think that's a healthy discussion to have.
You reached out to the Redevelopment Commission, asked for some funds. You were buying a couple of street sweepers, I think was the deal. Did you get your street sweeper?
We did, yes. And so that was a really important step in our budgeting process to relieve some of the need off of the general fund for the street department to have the equipment they need to do the work they need. And so redevelopment took a deep evaluation of that and funded that. And I'm thrilled that they did that. I thank them for that. And that it just helps in the budgeting process relieve some of that burden. Again, we're getting that same piece of pie. We got to cut it different ways each time, but having that kind of outside the box thinking, which Beth Fields was a part of, and again, one of the reasons she's in the controller's office, having that kind of outside the box thinking is a way for us to do more with the same size pie, you know.
Okay. We're down to our last little bit here, but we had a question
This
come
went
in.
really
so
fast. I can't believe how fast
it
this
always
went.
does. We had a question come in, so let's see where we go with that. As a community, how can we, I got to look this way, sorry, it's closer. As a community, how can we all do a much better job of helping to get these messages from the mayor to the street level? The same way I asked you to elaborate a little bit on Workshop Wednesday, not assuming everybody knows that. How does the message get out? And how do you get the message to people who want to help you get the message out?
Sure. You know, I think one of the best things that people can do is find, you know, you've got your circle of influence. That's why I'm trying to encourage neighborhoods to regather. Maybe your circle of influence is at your church. So if you're passionate about one of these subjects, if you're passionate about the positivity, if you're passionate about volunteering at our parks, volunteering for our citywide cleanup, wherever that circle of influence is, take that message there, take that message to your church and say, you know, let's band together, let's work on this. What can we do creatively to start a more positive message about the city? Can we come together and volunteer during the citywide cleanup to help clean up the city? Can we go as a group to Denise Retz, Park Superintendent, and say, could you use some volunteers this summer? That's what you can really do. And I want you to do what you're passionate about. You know, I worked within my passions. I started City Fit because I'm passionate about my health. I want people to be healthy. I started City Life because I'm very passionate about our local arts. And so I wanted to bring all that to the people. If you're passionate about our park system, round some people up in your circle of influence, get out to the park and start volunteering. If you're tired of seeing the trash, and let me talk about the trash for 1 second if I can. A lot of people call my office, this is really important, and say, I can always tell when it's trash day because the trash blows everywhere. And they blame our sanitation drivers all the time. So I actually spent a whole shift riding with a sanitation driver. I spent a whole shift on a trash truck. And man, those guys have a rough job. That was way harder than I realized. A lot of people are not properly bagging their trash in their Rosie rollers. So we're going down the street dumping rollers into the thing, and as soon as the lid opens, the trash blows everywhere on a windy day. Right. And so the trash guys are getting a bad rap for that. It's not their fault. We have really nice trucks. We have some trucks that need updated and some trucks that need replaced. But our trucks are doing great and our drivers are doing fantastic. Please, please, please make sure you're properly bagging your trash, putting it in your Rosie roller, setting it 6 inches away from the curb. That goes a long way in making sure the trash gets in the trash truck and stays in there. So anyway, I just wanted to make that quick point.
Okay.
But
I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to what I think this question was too. What are the plans? Hopefully, I'm not off base on this.
Okay.
Are there any additional plans to provide more communication? And you're out, and you do this show 3-4 times a year, and I appreciate that. But in the in-between times, are there any plans to try to build some way of better communication of what's happening in the city out to those people that aren't as connected, aren't picking up the newspaper every day, or those like me that are sitting in way more government meetings than I need to?
Right.
What's the communication piece so that the average person who right now is driving into their garage, bringing the door down, how do they find out what's going on?
Well, I would say on a few fronts. First of all, I try to make myself very accessible. I consistently preach that everybody deserves their time with the mayor. So if you catch me at the grocery store, that's where you catch me. We'll talk at the grocery store. I've done it many times. I've been trying on shirts at the department store and somebody comes up and talks to me about something in their neighborhood. I'm perfectly fine with that. The second thing is I told you I'm going to be out walking neighborhoods again. So I'll actually be out in neighborhoods. We'll make that known and we'll advertise that, you know, the mayor will be in your neighborhood if you want to talk to him. You know, please come out, say hi, you know, share your issues, share your concerns. And then we can schedule more town hall meetings. I've got one coming up in the next month or so, I believe. And we can schedule more of those. So if anybody out there feels like they're not connected, tell us, call my office and say, I'd like to have a town hall meeting in my neighborhood at one of our local schools, at our local church. I'd like the mayor to come speak to my church group or my service group, and I'm always happy to do that. If my schedule permits, I mean, if you call and say, can you do it this Friday? Maybe not.
Right.
Put some lead time on it, and I will do my very best to make that happen. And so I'll do everything I can to get those messages out there and communicate them. You know, it's one of the things I promised in the campaign, if you remember.
Yes.
I said like an unprecedented level of communication, a relationship with your mayor. And I'm trying very hard to have that. I mean, I try to be active on social media, post things, and be here. And I stop at the radio stations. And I just try to be out there. And so I want there to be that relationship and that accessibility all the time.
And we have had conversations about some type of program on a monthly basis here on WGTV. Have not been able to work out exactly the details and that type thing, but something like that may end up starting.
I would love to
again.
have something like that. And the other thing that people need to understand is, because of my desire to be so out there and accessible, here's the weird dichotomy of it. Is it creates an environment where you call the office and say, I want to talk to the mayor, and my assistant says he's not here, because I'm always trying to be out at everybody's events and so then some people will come and say, well, I've called your office 3 times, you weren't there. You keep saying you want to be Mr. Accessible. Well, you don't seem like it. And I say, well, that's kind of a weird thing. I'm trying to be everywhere, which means I'm not where you're trying to get me. So leave the message with my assistant, leave the voicemail, we'll get to it. But just know that I'm out of the office a lot.
Email address.
Email address. You can just email dsnow@richmondindiana.gov. It is the longest email address. richmondindiana.gov, all spelled out. dsnow. Or mayor at richmondindiana.gov, either one.
You've made it through another 90 minutes.
Hey, I'm happy to do it. This is fun. This goes
you.
fast. I really enjoy
appreciate you
this.
doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
It's
We'll
fun
see you
for me
again
to get to
soon.
unpack things and talk.
Okay.
That's what I like to do.
There you go. That's why we do 90 minutes. A couple of quick things I want to tell you about. If you want to talk to your state legislators, there is another IU East Legislative Forum tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. in the Graff Center in Springwood Hall. I'm not sure that Senator Rotz will have a chance to be there. I think he's got some things going on, but Representative Ham and Representative Saunders are scheduled to be there, and we will air that beginning tomorrow evening here on WGTV Channel 11. We'll also have it on our video on demand site. Find out next week what's going on with the Wayne County, as we have our In Focus again next Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Our guest will be Wayne County Commissioner President Ken Paust. We'll spend an hour talking about some of the work going on around Wayne County, some of the things that they've got going on, and catch up on some things. Also coming up this Sunday, Gospel Fest is going to be taking place. Earlham College should be a great time. Earlham's Gospel Revelations will be performing. That's in Goddard Auditorium, Carpenter Hall. Starts at 7 p.m. If you need some information, you can give a call tomorrow to 983-1373. Also want to remind you about WCTV's 21 for Fun, which is coming up on Saturday, June 17th. That's going to be in the Student Events and Activities Center here on the IU East campus. It is really a fun night. Blackjack, craps, roulette. You won't lose the house. Ticket price will get you in and also get you some playing money, and you can play for a whole lot of the evening. A lot of people have come and enjoyed that. If you missed any of our conversation with Mayor Snow, you can see In Focus during its replay starting tonight at 10:30, tomorrow night at 8, twice on Saturday, 8 a.m. and 9 p.m., and on Sunday, 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. We will be back next Thursday evening, as I mentioned again, talking with Wayne County Commissioners President Ken Paust, talking about a lot of the work going on around Wayne County. So we will see you again next Thursday evening. Remember, we are still under a tornado watch, and we will update that. Thanks for watching In Focus. Have a good night. This broadcast of In Focus has been made possible through the support of Reed Health.
Read Health, right beside you. And by First Bank Richmond, with 8 locations serving Wayne County. First Bank Richmond and you, doing great things together.
Watch Wayne County Connections on WGTV Channel 11, Tuesdays at 6. I'm your host, Michael Swigert, and this month we're in a series, Meet Your Wayne County Officers. Our guests this month are Jonathan Ferris from the Purdue Extension Services, Don Wampler from the Fairgrounds, and Bob Coddington, Wayne County Auditor. Watch Wayne County Connections, Tuesdays at 6 on WGTV Channel 11.
You are watching Whitewater Government Television, Channel 11.